Interesting interview between Donald Trump and he was being interviewed by Dr. Phil. First off, phenomenal interview. You can watch 19 minutes of it on his YouTube. The full hour blew my mind. I hadn't seen Donald Trump this authentic in a very long time.
Wow.
Fresh content and everything was really interesting. One of the things Dr. Phil put to Donald Trump was he showed him a map of the all the different areas that the Chinese-owned farmland. And it basically showed where the American bases are, which are the stars, and where the farmland's being bought up.
Wow.
And I just thought, geez, I wonder to what extent that's happening here. Have you guys got any thoughts on this particular thing with regards to defense and everything?
I don't know where the Chinese are buying farmland. I am aware that they are. I've heard from a friend of mine who used to work for someone who was from China how large a farmland they were buying in Victoria, actually, funnily enough. Just don't know how close that was to any bases. But yeah, it's disturbing. It's disturbing. And it was an amazing interview. And I found Donald Trump, the one thing Donald Trump has that a lot of politicians don't, is he's a real patriot. And that's what we're missing in a lot of the politicians of today.
I know there's a lot being born around the new airport in Western Sydney. That's been happening for at least 10, 20 years now. Badgerys Creek, which is obviously nearing completion very soon, which they always say. But also the blue gums in Victoria as well, with regards to the trees there being sold and sent overseas.
Can I make a slightly unpopular point, most likely, to do with Chinese ownership of things? I don't actually see how it's such a terrible thing from a geopolitical strategic perspective. Because the minute an actual war starts, and this is, I think, a miscalculation they've made, for example, with their Belt and Road Initiative, they've enslaved, effectively, lots of relatively impoverished nations with debt that they can never repay. And they're sitting there going, oh, well, now we're going to own all of these assets and you're going to do all these things for us. The minute there's an actual shooting war involving China, every one of those countries has to do is join the other side against China, and they can just forgive their own debts to China.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
There's actually, in a sense, from a geopolitical perspective, China's holding of all of these assets and a holding of all of these loans that they've loaned out is, in a sense, a powerful disincentive for them to start any sort of a frivolous war.
Yeah.
Just a few other little contrary.
Yeah, sure.
points to that. I can remember one day down in Canberra, there was the Chinese premier was coming out to speak in the parliament. And there were two Chinese groups. There were the Falun Gong people, and there were the Chinese loyal communist supporters. Now, I don't know how many of these loyal Chinese communist supporters there are here in Australia, but there's an awful lot of them. And if there ever was a shooting war, which side would they be on?
Well,
they wouldn't be. They certainly wouldn't be on our side. But look, it's not only farmland that our concern should be. I think it's also real estate. Our bricks and mortar, land, freehold land. That is, we're seeing money coming in from not only China, but also from other countries in Southeast Asia. The legitimacy of the money, how it's been earned, is I think in many cases highly questionable when you see some of the prices that are being paid. And you can imagine if you've got $10 million in assets sitting in China, what's better? Would you rather have $5 million in Australian property that you can pass down, it's governed and secured by the rule of law and property rights, than have $10 million in China? So you see this money coming out of China, are buying up Australian property, setting these prices in the market, especially here in Sydney. And that's basically forcing young Australians out of the market. I think we should be having restrictions, and it's not someone from China or overseas coming in and buying residential housing. That is not foreign investment. Foreign investment is where they, build in a new factory or a new plant or something, actually produce goods in Australia. This is a foreign takeover when they come and take over residential real estate.
Yeah, because you couldn't buy that there. The same, if you wanted to buy 100 acres. I did know of a property sale in Western Sydney near Badgerys Creek, about 100 acres, I would say. That the person that bought it also bought 400 other acres, so 500 in total. My dad made a cracker point at the time. It's probably 2017. He said, Joel, not all of them like the Communist Party. Sometimes they're actually trying to get their money out of the country. And the problem is that we don't know who's who. I mean, first off, there's obvious, you'd have to understand the culture and have that conversation and ascertain, and maybe even speak the language to ascertain that. But these things aren't obvious.
No, they're not. And it's not exactly a true communist government if you've got people bringing into a country such money. In a true communist government, no one's earning such money. And I know when you go to auctions around Sydney, there is a large Chinese community or somebody on the phone to someone in China who is buying up real estate.
Yeah.
And it started off as new apartments or investment properties or whatever it was. It is no longer new apartments. It is existing dwellings.
Yeah.
So China, just for the record, is actually not a communist country. It's a communist country with Chinese characteristics, which when you actually take an honest look at what it is actually fascism.
Yeah.
So communism and fascism are very close cousins. Under communism, the government owns and controls the means of production. Under fascism, the government controls the means of production without necessarily owning it. And that was essentially the difference that I think it was Deng Xiaoping, the reformer, brought in when he recognized the benefits of private ownership thanks to a couple of farming communities in deeply inland China. I won't go into that. 1974, if my memory serves me correctly. He recognized the importance of private ownership. He brought in his reforms, which then created this this communism with Chinese characteristics. It is essentially fascism, the merger, the bonding together of the corporate and government, and that's what we're actually seeing.
It's just a bad word. You can't use that word.
I do have one more thing to say before we close.
Yeah, please.
Sarah Palin. That's who I was trying to think of.
Yes.
Oh, right.
At the very start of, there you go. That's the bookend for you. From the very start of the show, Sarah Palin.
Very good. Very